All right, we just had a great chance to interview Brett Adcock, the CEO of Humanoid robot Figure Robotics. Dr. Scott Walter, two-time robotics company founder, and I were able to ask him some questions, whether or not they're progressing in not only the hardware, but also the AI, and then what are their plans for manufacturing. And of course, we had to dig deep into the two big blockbuster news that they had. One about their new AI capability to be able to, in this case, a demo of the bot, be able to make coffee. And the other one, of course, was the big partnership with BMW. So today we've got Scott Walter with us. He was with me in that interview. And we got Søren Basher. He's been doing a lot of business models regarding robotics. So welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hello, Herbert. Thanks to be here.
So Søren, what was your immediate reaction after you saw the video? What's your thoughts?
Well, there were lots of different things that ran through my mind, but the main thing is that there's clearly a lot of activity going on behind the scenes in the humanoid robot space. And we've been looking at things probably largely through a Tesla lens, which has been very interesting. But clearly there's a number of startups, and one in particular, Figure AI, is having a lot of conversations with lots of different companies and executives. And it was quite fascinating actually to hear from Brett about all the different things that they're working on.
Yes, when the interview started, the first thing I was thinking was CERN and all the models that we've been kind of collaborating on for about the past 9 months. Because we've built in a lot of assumptions without really having enough information of what the market is like. And as you know, as we've worked through the numbers, we've been very cautious about a lot of our assumptions, very conservative, and CERN just constantly used the word nutty. Everything is kind of nutty. And it's based on some things that we don't know, and that is how perceptive the market is to this idea. And CERN even put out a tweet a few weeks ago saying if companies are not considering this, they may need to, because they are going to be laggards or they're going to be in trouble in the future. And it turns out all these companies, from what we've been able to see from that, clearly are thinking about the problem. And so that's the first real data point we have. And that's what really excited me about it, is like, whoa, the day before that, no one thought a humanoid bot was tangible. It was going to happen. They thought it was fantasy. No one was putting into their valuation models for Tesla. They were putting in Robotaxi, they're putting in Dojo as a service, they're putting everything else in, but they were completely ignoring Optimus because no one thought it was for real. When that announcement was made, suddenly everyone began to realize it was real. But now when we spoke with Brett and we found out that he had so many dance partners to choose from, and he had to say no to so much business. I mean, that is an enviable position to be in, when you get to pick your customers rather than it being the other way around. And so that means now we can kind of relook at a lot of those evaluation models and be able to put, let's say, much higher confidence that the market is going to go this way. Because Brett reiterated many points that CERN has made many, many times about labor shortages, about attrition rates, about turnover within the companies. And so it was really nice to get kind of validation on a lot of the assumptions we've been working on.
Yeah, the thing that I was very impressed with was, and I'm still trying to digest it, is this progress, the rate of progress, right? So he talked about that. He said that the hardware is going to be something that we can feel very confident about, ready to scale within 6 months from now. Then he said that the AI is progressing much faster than he realized. Initially thought it's going to take much longer. Now it's progressing faster. But then he backtracked and he said that, okay, this partnership with BMW, it's going to take a year. We're hoping to launch in a year. We're going to start with just identifying the task, then we'll move on. And then the AI, he showed that it can work, but he then didn't really kind of said, we're going to be able to now train everything within 6 months. That might take long too. So let's listen to one of his clips that he talks about AI progress.
The AI process for training and deploying these policies is arguably ready today, pending like really good functioning hardware and training sets. So I think our view today is that as soon as like really like reliable hardware is brought up at scale, there's a process that we've designed now in-house and a data engine we've designed now in-house to train the robots on how to do pretty complicated applications in the real world.
What do you guys think?
Well, I wanted to follow up that and ask him what he meant by complicated applications, but he didn't quite have time in there. But I'm assuming he's meaning clearly a bit more than what's going on with a coffee maker, and more like what they are actually seeing in the shop floor. And potentially, I think he was alluding to even beyond that, is you would be able to get to general purpose. but it seems there is a high degree of confidence that all the pieces are coming together, that you can start actually training it to do a lot of these tasks in there, and training it more or less by showing it what the task has to be and not having to hard code it or using any sort of heuristics. So the BMW test case will be the first example of them really being able to deploy that in the real world to see if you're able to get the results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I share that view. I think the hope is that they find a way to train the bot very efficiently. And I think that comment gives some clue that they feel that they may be onto something there in terms of being able to do that efficiently and quite quickly. So it'll be interesting to watch the development over the next few months on that.
I was a little shocked when he said that the AI team is going to be in-house. It's not going to be a partnership with Google DeepMind or Scott and I. We kind of like just assumed you can't do it on your own, but he said we are an AI company first. So.
Yes, and I had a conversation with James and Hans a few days ago. Before that, where we were discussing a little bit about it, and we asked James, what kind of compute they needed for it, and he was of the feeling it's like it's not that big. It's not like trying to train a large language model. That he said you'd be surprised that you're able to have a much smaller kind of compute footprint versus everything else. So it may be that they really can do it in-house. And if they have the AI expertise and the people that know how to juggle all the pieces together, that would be a huge breakthrough as well. To imagine you do not need something like what was needed to train ChatGPT.
Okay, let's listen to the next clip. This is him talking a little bit more about partnerships outside of the auto industry and as well as the BMW partnership. Let's listen to what he says.
Another commercial agreement that we've not announced today that's not in auto space. And as of this point, right now, at least for 2024, Figure is not taking on any more clients. We've turned down a few dozen in the last few weeks here, going into the BMW kickoff we had and commercial announcement. The priority for us at Figure is to be able to ship robots into the real world and do real useful work. Like that's what really matters at the end of the day. So in order to do that, we clearly have to design a product, like a robotic solution product that works really well. And we need a customer. We need to be able to ship robots into real companies that can do real useful work. So having BMW here is, for us, a part of the puzzle. It's now complete on being able to actually ship robots into real life. And we hope to do that, at the earliest this year, and ship into BMW's Spartanburg, South Carolina plants, which is what happens to be like what they're basically the facility that does like basically the most cars produced per year than any other facility globally for them. And they have on the ground there like one of the best robotics teams I've seen. And that team is basically spearheading basically the integration and deployment of our humanoid robots into that Spartanburg facility. And I think we ultimately like basically turned down every major car group to do this.
Thoughts?
I think that was one of the most interesting comments that he made overall. I've been talking to every auto company. That was pretty interesting to hear, and that they selected BMW. So that really says something about where BMW is at. And I think that we've seen BMW's progress, or beginning to see the progress that BMW is making in the EV space. And the fact that they're looking beyond that, or looking to improve that, in all the ways possible, including deploying humanoid robots, is a strong sign for BMW. Now, I know that there are a lot of folks out there that might be skeptical about BMW and what they've said in the past and their intentions, but we're hearing it from the CEO of this company, Figure AI, that BMW is very serious, and they think BMW is their best partner in the automotive space. So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're not only hearing it from the CEO of Figure, we're also hearing it from the CEO of BMW. So the official press release that came from Figure, there was also a statement from the CEO for manufacturing for BMW. So that means it's it was signed off at the highest levels. Brett talked a little bit about how difficult it is to get an automotive OEM to agree to something like this with a startup. And I absolutely agree, having gone through that myself. Our own company, we've been working with a major automotive OEM since 2009, and we still cannot mention them, even though very successful, hundreds of licenses and everything else. It's very difficult to kind of get that stage for them to do it. The other thing I'd like to say is that, a lot of times you do have a lot of customers that come in, and sometimes you work with a customer and you wish you had not picked them because it turns out they're not really ready for your technology. They don't quite have the competence. They're just not kind of lined up. And then other times you'll find ones where they are absolutely a pleasure to work with. They're really sharp. They're on top of everything. They're pulling you along. They're teaching you as much as you are them. Those are the kind of partners you want. So I could believe that a lot of automotive OEMs came to them. And some of them may have been, let's say, a little bit disingenuous. They're kind of kicking the tires. They're trying to find out. They get a little bit of thing, but you can kind of see like, no, they're not ready. But then you see a couple of others. BMW, the Spartanburg plant is the most efficient plant that BMW has, which means it's been highly automated. It's been highly thought out. It's very, very modern. And they probably have a workforce down there. They mentioned the robotics group they have down there that is very competent, know what they're doing. And suddenly you realize, wow, this fits, because not only do we have the internal competence and the people who are willing to do it, the plant is probably already pretty well configured for them to be able to go in and start doing it. So I'm sure they looked at it and said, this ticks a lot of boxes. The other possibility is that they've been talking to BMW for 6 or 7 months now. That was very clear. These other companies may have started talking to them maybe in the past couple of weeks or the past couple of months. So let's say those talks were not as far along, and at the same time, it would have been a little bit harder to kind of judge whether they would have been good. But I do think that's a very interesting comment, that at least all of them are aware that the humanoid bot is coming, and they have to start looking closely at it or finding a partner.
I found it very interesting that he chose an auto company. He didn't need to, because as I'll play this next clip, he's talking to many Fortune 50s, Fortune 100s. And but why the auto company? Now, BMW is a great choice. I just did another show showing that BMW has actually already made a full commitment to go entirely battery electric vehicles. They've just hit the tipping point where they're now no longer, they're selling more electrified vehicles than they are gas cars. And they're doing very well in terms of their sales. And so that's a fantastic choice for them. Listen into this next clip that he talks about him talking to Fortune 500.
50 Fortune 100 CEOs last year, and companies. This was probably arguably one of our top picks to work with.
50 Fortune 100 CEOs. I mean, did he just make up that number? Is it really true? That's a lot.
Well, that speaks to something that, again, that I've talked about recently, is that the economics of humanoid robots is such that every CEO of every major company needs to be aware and pay attention to this, and they need to be partnering up and working on this. It does beg the question, if they've turned down every major car group to work with BMW, what's Ford going to do now? What's GM going to do now? Toyota, Hyundai, Volkswagen, you name it. If that statement is true and they actually turn down the other automakers, or many of them, then where are those companies going to go? Who are they going to partner with? So again, it might be quite interesting in the next few months to see some of the partnership announcements potentially.
Yeah, 50 Fortune 100 companies. This is what you've been saying, Scott. You and I have been very talking about how in such a need this is, but everybody else kept saying this is just, you're being too aggressive, and they're not ready. This is a CEO of a humanoid bot telling you that 50 Fortune 100 companies are very excited. They want to move forward, but he can't do it. He can only pick small company.
And I think it would also be interesting to go down the list of the Fortune 100 companies and what is it that they do. Now, I assume some of them might be like financial services and banks and things like that, so we can pull them out of the mix. But we know Apple's up there, Amazon's up there, some telecommunication companies up there. There may be some oil and gas, obviously other automotives, aerospace. CERN, do you have kind of the list in front of you? Because it'd be rather interesting to go through, because then we get an idea of the industries that are thinking that they need to bring the humanoid bots in there. And again, I agree with CERN that There are not that many humanoid bot manufacturers out there right now. There's not enough dance partners, it seems like. So if you look at all these automotive OEMs, are they going to put together some sort of collaboration to work with one of them? I think I'd heard some rumors that maybe Kia is doing something with Boston Dynamics, and Boston Dynamics we haven't heard much for the past 12 months. Maybe they're going to make some sort of big announcement, and that particular group is going to be thinking of doing it. It's going to be interesting to see. So we know there's Sanctuary out there, and Sanctuary has already got one of their partners that they work with is Magna. Magna is a very large automotive integrator. They build lines for the automotive companies. But so that dance partner may already be taken. We know Amazon is already kind of partnering with Agility. So how many more can Agility bring on? There are not that many other startups in the US right now. There are some others overseas. There's quite a few popping up in China, and you've got to begin to wonder, are you going to start seeing relationships being announced with them, or is it going to be they're making announcements with Chinese automotive companies? You know, BYD and NIO and Zhepeng and others, they may be saying, we want to do the humanoid bots as well. And so it may be they're left out in the cold and may almost have to think of, we're going to put together our own skunk works. But I'm not sure that those automotive companies have the capability to do that.
Yeah, so it's not just automotive companies. The commercial demand is through the roof. As CERN has been talking about, this next clip, it just solidifies this. It's not like a particular industry. It's like every company is demanding this. Let's play the clip and we'll get CERN to react to this one.
It was clearly, it was unclear for me, like, we're like 19 months old today. So 19 months ago, it was unclear really what the commercial demand looked like. My view of this now is that the commercial demand is almost unbounded. Like every company we talk to is experiencing significant labor issues, extremely high attrition per week. There's a lot of jobs that need to be automated that are dangerous, repetitive, and boring. And if you can do human-like work, there's a huge gap to fill in the labor crisis that's going on today. Most of the companies we spoke to were in the US and Europe, and it was systemic across every company we've met, meaning every company we met had massive labor pains.
Massive labor pains. Go ahead, sir.
Well, if you look at it through the lens of, in 2020, a global pandemic hit, and look at the disruption that occurred around the world with supply chains and everything else. And since then, companies have been scrambling to try to get things back to normal. And you've got cross currents there of, a lot of people retiring, and there's a skills gap. And then there's all these jobs that they just can't fill the positions for. They want to grow. They want to hire people. They're just not in the right location. They can't find them. There's huge turnover. The list of problems goes on and on and on. These companies have been dealing with this now for certainly the last few years, but of course, even before that, these were issues. And so I would imagine he has got a very willing audience every time he picks up the phone and asks for a meeting with the CEO of a major company. They are experiencing major labor challenges. And so any company with a technology that has the potential to solve even a portion of that, he's going to have them all years. And that's what he's saying. When you start a private company, you've got an idea, you think you're a solution for, kinds of companies out there in the world, and you don't really know until you start talking to people. And he's reporting back to us now that in the conversations he's had, there's a tremendous excitement about the technology that he's working on.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just play this next clip because it's very, very similar, and then we'll have Scott reply to this as well.
From a product perspective, if Figure can deliver a functioning humanoid that can do human-like work, we'll ship millions and then billions of robots into the market. It was overwhelming how many companies, like very significant brands and executive teams we met with over the last year, it was basically the who's who of everybody.
I just want to clarify, or just reiterate that. Did you not see how many clips we have of him talking about the commercial demand and all the people we talked to? This isn't just a flipping remark. This is real. Scott, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is whether you're a believer in figure AI or not, or whether they have the bot that's going to do it. The important data point here is the demand, because this is something we've been trying to figure out. We know there are problems with labor. I've heard a lot about it from a variety of different sources. I've sort of seen it myself, even before COVID, the difficulty of sort of keeping workers in the factory, the turnover and everything else, the skills problem, the known demographic issues that were coming with a retiring workforce. A lot of companies scrambling to try to automate systems that with traditional robots as best as they can before a lot of those people attrit and retire. So it's kind of been a known problem that's just getting worse. And I think the one thing that I would disagree a little bit with CERN on is he says that every time he decides to get a CEO on the phone, they're willing to take it. I think it's the other way around. He's not calling them anymore. He doesn't need to.
They're calling him.
They're calling him. And if that's happening there, I have a feeling it's happening a lot of other places as well. Because again, they started doing this 6 months ago. They're only 19 months old. So they were barely a year old. There had not been many announcements, yet everyone was kind of snooping around trying to figure out what's going on. The other thing, if you think about it from EV startups, any sort of Silicon Valley startup, they have a valuation around $400 and something million based on their last funding round, in which they raised $70 million. They've been able to do a lot in $70 million. I mean, they have about 70 employees. And when you kind of think about it in Silicon Valley with all the salaries and everything else you need, they seem to be, pretty much able to spend their capital wisely. And that's a small valuation as far as I'm concerned, compared to what you normally see going on in Silicon Valley. I would think the next round is going to be very big. And of course, you can see there's a lot of excitement already. Everyone's probably wondering, how do I invest in companies like this? Unfortunately, you can't right now. It's done through these VC kind of traditional rounds. It's going to be a while. But I have a feeling that not only are they going to see financial interest wanting to come in to help them out, but so are all the other bot manufacturers. And we're going to hear probably a couple more announcements, I imagine, of new startups as they begin to realize that there is a huge TAM out there. It's hard to resist a pie that big.
Okay, let's talk about the BMW use cases. He started to talk about it. He's already announced that they haven't told anybody what the first use case is, but it sounds like it's going to be slow. Like first they're going to identify the use case, which he says he already knows, but they're going to work with BMW. Then they will work on that one specific use case for a while. But then there's 5 skill sets. So let's listen to what he's saying here.
We've explored now at BMW like dozens of use cases. They all look really great. There's a real need on the floor to help automate these different tasks. We've now narrowed that list down to 5 that we think are really tractable.
Yeah, thoughts?
Yeah, my overall feeling is that their game plan going forward seemed to make sense on how they brought the teams in. They started evaluating a lot of things. They started paring things down, and they tried to identify the low-hanging fruit. And in this case, I think what they've done is they've identified the low-hanging fruit. This, I like to say, is so low it's on the floor already rotting. So they're really easy to kind of go after. 5 skill sets, and what that skill sets is that not like they're looking for one specific task, but they're looking for a group of tasks that you can do. And in the press release, one of the skill sets they mentioned had to do with sheet metal in the body shop, and we know exactly what it is. And we did ask Brett directly about that. He wasn't really able, except by signaling with drinking his cup of coffee, that we probably had a pretty good guess. And that is, all along we said it's coming down to feeding the cuckoos at the robot zoo. And what we mean by that is that, as we know, the big industrial robots can be pretty dangerous if you go into their caged area when the robots are running. So they have cages around there to protect the humans, and the humans have to constantly feed the robots like you need to feed the lions at the zoo. And you feed the lions at the zoo through something, you open up a little door, you put the meat in there, you put it on down there to make sure they can grow. It's very similar. So that everything is kind of roped off, you could say, or caged off between the human and that. So you've got a rather dangerous situation that has actually been made very safe because of all these safeguards that go around there. But you still need a human that's just picking up sheet metal from dunnage, walking it on over and dropping it in there. And it's able to do it at a fairly relaxed pace. So it's not like they're having to sprint around and go really fast, but it's the same thing. It's very easy to do. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of stations like that. So they're all very similar. So if you can nail one of them, then you would be able to go to the others. And then that would be, okay, task one. And I'm sure there's a bunch of others where they're able to say that if we can nail that task, there's several dozen stations like that, or maybe 100 stations that are very similar. We can start to go in there too. So even though it might say they're only doing 5 tasks, it could have a significant impact in the throughput of what's going on. And it could also be those positions where they have a high degree of attrition because it's a very repetitive, boring job. For 8 hours, you're picking up sheet metal, dropping it, picking it up, dropping it, doing it again and again. Easy to train someone up like that. Doesn't take that long, but still, if they quit after a couple of weeks, you got to go out and find someone else and go through that whole process. So that's my guess of where they're going there. And I think we're seeing enough signs from reading the tea leaves that that's probably what.
Okay. So one of the things that I think is quite important is that he talked about how the hardware is going to be design ready and, ready to scale. He said 6 months from now. The AI, at least they've proven that it can work. Then he talked about the third major problem after they solve these two is going to be manufacturing. And here he didn't really give very clear direction of when that will happen. And so let's listen into what he says here.
It becomes it's becoming very clear that the hardware will probably get really reliable, and we'll probably be able to figure out how to teach the robot how to do most things a human can. So it becomes really a manufacturing volume game, and the faster that we can learn how to do scale manufacturing here at Figure, the better, because that learning curve is extremely steep.
Okay, and I'm going to actually play the next clip because it just really is a perfect
I suspect we'll make some announcements, over the coming year or two on like how we'll think about manufacturing and be much more public about it. But I would say right now, most of our focus is going to how do we design for this? How do we ship robots in these applications to make it work? How do we think about collecting the right data? Like that's like the base information and milestones that we need to prove out in order to think about high rate manufacturing. Probably one of the arguably the hardest and most important things we have, but you're not going to get there unless you're really shipping robots in their first use cases, building the right data engine sets, and doing the right training.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Well, he's touched on, I think, one of the key challenges that these startups are going to face, particularly if they don't come from a manufacturing background. And this is the advantage, I suppose, that Tesla has over these firms, is that they think about manufacturing when they're designing the robot. And so this is going to be a potentially a tremendous challenge for them because they have enough on their plate right now to solve the hardware side and solve the AI side. That's a lot of work right there. But for this all to work, it all has to come together and be manufactured at scale. Now, to his point, if they can just deploy, a few thousand bots or a few hundred bots, they may be able to start that, revenue flow coming in. And through the modeling we've done, it's a very profitable business potentially. So, in his mind right now, he probably wants to get to some kind of profitability. They may not have to worry about that if they can attract, some big manufacturing partners. So that'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Scott?
Yeah. Also from some of the other clips, we had asked them about some of the designs, and it seems like they are thinking about design for manufacture. So they are not trying to design something that's difficult to manufacture. They may not have, let's say, all the experience to do it perfectly, but they are keeping in mind, making sure they can do it. They know they can manufacture a lot of the components currently in-house at a rate that's probably sufficient for them to be able to supply BMW in this early phase. So again, they should be able to probably produce a couple hundred robots if they need to. 1,000 might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think at that point, if they are starting to really prove it's working, that's when there's probably going to be the next round of funding they're going to need, which is the capital intensive funding that you need in order to scale it, to build manufacturing. Now, if they are working with a lot of partners that are manufacturers themselves, they may get into some kind of collaboration or some sort of joint venture agreements with them to figure out how to start manufacturing and building these things at scale. There's all kinds of possibilities there. So I agree, scaling is going to be a problem, but I think Brett realizes that Yeah, it's a problem, but again, it's one of those things that you don't worry about it right now, because if you can't prove that you have a product that works, there's no point to worry about scaling. Demonstrate that capability first, and then that should take care of itself later on. It's a little bit different than the EV space, where again, the prototypes are easy and production is hard. Building an automotive plant is extremely difficult, extremely capital intensive. Building a bot plant will also be a little bit intensive and a little bit of capital, but not at the same level. So it's probably something that's more doable, and the skill sets and everything else that will be required will be less. So they should be able to bring them in when they need it, but clearly right now they do not have the capital to be able to do it. They are focused on proving that the product is going to work.
Yeah, I guess the other way I'd look at it is that they, like you just said there, they obviously are not built for mass scale, high rate manufacturing. And so they probably are still working on trying to bring in the funding, plan big. Because there is this, it kind of makes sense when he says, oh, I need to slow down. I need to prove it first. There's a lot of work to design lock the hardware, to prove the AI can work, find a first use case, and then do scale manufacturing. But also it's true, the opposite, right? Which is you need to build the hardware in mind of scaling, and you need to already start the scaling process now, because it's not like something you just turn on 6 months, a year from now. You need to start it today. Okay? You have to build a factory. You need to start figure out the processes of how you build everything at scale. That alone is a massive. So if you look at Tesla bot process, you look at their career pages, they've been hiring for the last 6 months, lots of jobs specifically for manufacturing of the robot already, despite them not yet proving that they have the AI, not yet. Well, they've done their demos as well. And so forth. So let's, what I will do, of course, is we're going to have a second show to complete this review and reaction to Brett Adcock. But before we do that, what's your kind of thoughts on either manufacturing or the things that we talked about earlier today?
The key takeaway for me, or the interesting thing is, in the next announcement that Figure has, or the next one or two announcements, is one of those companies, Figure is not only helping them out, but can that company then help figure out how Figure can manufacture
Figure out
the robot at scale, right? So if they partner with a big manufacturing firm, for example, then there's a tell, I think, that they're trying to solve this problem simultaneously. If they partner with a firm that's outside of the manufacturing space, let's just say it's a retailer or something, right? So that company, those companies would not be able to help Figure build the robot. It's more just from a pure customer perspective, how Figure is going to help them save money. So that'll be interesting to see if they try to solve that problem with the partnership.
Interesting. Thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I agree. As Cern was saying that, I was saying that, if the next announcement is Walmart, then we know it's like, oh, that's not actually the company that's going to be able to help you scale or do the manufacturing. But if it's someone else that clearly is in a manufacturing space, and there could be others that are not necessarily automotive, but still big scale. Maybe it's an aerospace company. Maybe it's a heavy that knows a thing or two about being able to ramp up and scale. They may be able to kind of pick up that from there. And I think it sounds to me that from what Brett had said is that they're thinking about how to design the robot so it can be mass produced. They just don't know how to mass produce it yet. So at least they're taking that part into account. That, let's make sure it's simple enough and easy enough that it can be made. And clearly they have to be able to make it in-house.
Oh, we just lost Scott. Okay. I guess I'll do my little thing, which is I think these guys are real deal. They're going to be able to make it. They're going to get funding. They're going to get more customers. And that alone just continues the process. I think their hardware still is going to go through another Gen 2 because the Gen 1 that they showed is just not quite yet complete. So they'll probably do another Gen 2 of the hardware. And then their AI, they did that one demo. So that's great. But I'm still a little just wondering if their team, I think has convinced me that they've got a great team for AI, but I feel like they need to partner. They need to have access to data centers. They need to have access to chips. This isn't just a small team. And so big partnerships yet to come. for them to finalize the hardware, Gen 2, and then finalize the AI, but they've got the partnerships to kind of bring in more money. And so this is going to happen quickly. Scott, I just kind of give my summary. Any last thoughts?
The last thought for me is that this helps to validate, I think, this whole space. It's no longer just Elon pursuing some pipe dream. There are startups, there are companies getting funding, and we're starting to see some bigger players in this space, and I think we'll see more. And that's the important thing. And then, of course, what Brett said in terms of the conversations that they're having with executives from Fortune 100 companies. It's going to be fascinating to see how this develops over time. But this space is now, it's real, it's been validated. It's going to be an interesting space to watch.
Scott?
Yeah. Is he frozen?
Yeah. Again, I think what I have to say is that CERN and I were basically, we were separated at birth because CERN is always bringing up the same points that I'm about to bring up, articulating them a little bit better than I can. It's rather interesting that not only do we have a lot of similar interests, but whenever we go out to a restaurant, we end up ordering the same meal. So again, okay. we're kind of in sync on this quite a bit. CERN agrees. You see, that's kind of a funny situation. And exactly, the same points about what they have to do to scale. What are the issues that are going to come on there? But the main thing is the validation that the market really exists. That I think of also on the record talking to John and a few others before the video came out, when I couldn't say very much, that what changed with that announcement? What changed with the announcement is a few days before, no one was looking at it in their evaluation models. And it'll be interesting to see if this week, whether some of the Wall Street analysts decide to start looking at these things. How is that going to change? Because it is no longer a stigma. This idea that we're going to be having humanoid robots in our manufacturing, or we're thinking about it, that changed. And so the next couple of weeks is going to really be the tell on who has been taking it seriously and who's really sitting on the sidelines and who is looking for a dance partner, who is really showed up at the dance a bit too late.
Yeah. All right. So, we did a deep dive and pulling out some of the key comments that Brett made in that interview for the first half of the interview. There's a lot more. We're going to go and find out more about what exactly they're doing within BMW, what their thoughts about AI and the development of the AI specifically, and the future. Where does Brett think to do? We'll do that. We'll have another follow-up, so keep an eye on that. And if you haven't yet, go find out. Go check out that video, the deep dive interview that Scott and I did with Brett Adcock of Figure Robotics. That's on my channel. Thank you both, and we'll do another follow-up soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.